again. Thank you for attending our 12:30 session, Medline Plus and Medline Plus Espanol overview. We are so excited that you are here. I am proud to introduce our speaker, Javier Chavez. Mr. Chavez serves as the bilingual programs lead for the National Library of Medicine Health Information Program. He is a member of the team that oversees and maintains Medline Plus in Espanol, an online health information resource and service of the National Library of Medicine, part of the National Institutes of Health. Previously, Mr. Chavez worked for the Food and Drug Administration as a patient advocate. He serves as a liaison between the FDA and patient advocacy and health organizations. Mr. Chavez is a member of the United States Army Reserve, serving for 28 plus years. He is currently the acting operations sergeant major for a unit tasked with protecting the homeland in the event of a chemical, biological, or nuclear incident. Recent assignments include active duty tours at the Walter Reed National Military Medical Center, supporting wounded warriors, rehabilitation in the traumatic brain injury and post-traumatic stress disorder program. And now I will happily turn it over to Javier.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. I am currently away on military obligations, so I apologize in advance if you see soldiers parading behind me. I do, however, have a trusted guard at the door, so she is on standby and making sure that we have no interruptions. I'm incredibly honored and grateful for the opportunity to be invited to once again and present and discuss a little bit about Medline Plus and Medline Plus in Espanol. The intent here is to provide you with an overview of our program and to facilitate any questions and offer you some resources and support that we offer our consumers on a daily basis. Thank you very much for that very warm introduction. I'm incredibly grateful and honored to be among such professionals and advocates for this type of program. So let's begin the tour, and I'm going to hope to make this a little bit interactive as we move along. So please feel free to push any questions or comments and into the chat thread. I have some fantastic colleagues who will be assisting me with the thread with any questions or concerns, or if I place any questions or conversation points. So let's begin. Slide, please. So this is our agenda. We'll talk a little bit about consumer background, the need to translate those cultural challenges. We'll focus on some of those resources in Espanol, and I've even brought some sample products in our social media pages. So let's get started. Next slide, please. So let's talk about the U.S. bilingual consumer, because this is why we're here. Currently in the United States, 62.1 million people who identify as Latino or Hispanic, and we know that Spanish is a very common language that's non-English, that's spoken at home. And we're talking about millions and millions of consumers. And, in the United States, over the last 10, 20, 30 years and incrementing, people are adopting a bilingual culture. And we're certainly embracing that multi-language approach across public health. Next slide, please. So the first question, why translate to Spanish? We know this is an arguing task. It raises so many difficulties and challenges for different programs to create content in Spanish. For NLM, we are in alignment with the NLM strategic plan, specifically plan goal number 2, where we're trying to reach more people in more ways through enhanced dissemination and engagement pathways. What we want to do, what we aim to do with Medline Plus Espanol is to reduce health disparities and support underserved communities, because they do bear that disproportionate burden of disease. Making this content available for these consumers, and I'm not just speaking about the Spanish-speaking consumers, there's another population in the middle, the bilingual speakers, who dabble a little bit in English and a little bit in Spanish. I usually begin my presentations by telling people that I'm a native New Yorker. So the old Spanglish, it comes natural to me. While I hope to stay away from the merging of two languages incorrectly, I certainly want to bring you some content in Espanol as we move through the slides. Next slide, please. So a little bit about Medline Plus. All of the links that are contained in the presentation, my colleagues are going to place them into the chat thread for your availability. But to give you an idea, most of our information, nearly all of it, is available in both English and Spanish. And we cover those health topics in Medline Plus. I'll dabble a little deeper into each one of these resources as we move along in the slide deck. This is a quick overview, but there is information available in multiple language. We do have that resource as well. And then, of course, we're proud of our content in medical tests. Next slide. A little more about Medline Plus. These additional resources are government and non-government organizations. I placed a couple of examples here. These are vetted and trusted partners, as we call them. But then additionally, I will provide those links to PubMed, to ClinicalTrials.gov, and then Medline Plus Connect. And again, these are all fantastic resources that I highly encourage you to please visit. Next slide. Okay, so we do have licensed content. Again, I will dive a little bit deeper into the different types of resources. But we do have licensed content provided by Adam. We call this our medical encyclopedia. We also have a substantial site for drug, herbs, and supplements. And then, of course, our Medline Plus comprehensive database of natural medicines. Next slide. Okay, just a quick visual. So this is what the health information looks like. Health information in multiple languages looks like. It's alphabetized from A to Z, and it is very significant. This is what our clinicaltrials.gov page looks like. And all of these resources are linked into our site. Next graphic. All right, this is what the drug, herbs, and supplements look like. And this is basically, again, alphabetized, and all of the content is really available here at your fingertips. And I apologize if the graphics are going up and down. It could be the connectivity on my end. Next graphic, please. Okay, this is the face of the medical test page. And once again, all of our content here is from A to Z. And one more. I will highlight this in a little bit, but at the top right of the page, there is a toggle switch for Espanol. So we're looking at the content in English, and I'll show you in the next slide or two what that toggle looks like and how to basically navigate from English to Spanish, which is one of the most fantastic features, I believe, of our content, of our sites. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's talk about these health topics. So this content is translated by a team of Spanish health content specialists. We're looking at almost 13,000 links of this health information available in Spanish and 22,000 links in English. And if everyone wants to take a quick stab at maybe identifying why only 13,000 in Spanish and 22,000 in English, feel free to put something on the chat, and we'll begin some interaction early. We are cross-referencing, we cross-reference authoritative sources because we want to make sure that the information we're providing you is accurate and trustworthy. And certainly we are respectful and sensitive to cultural nuances. You know, I like to tell people that my team, we thrive at the meeting point of translation and transcreation. There's a lot of information going on here in this slide. So first I want to highlight the sensitivity to these cultural nuances, but really sensitivity to different cultures. It's one thing that separates Latinos, Hispanics from many other cultures is that we are many people united by one language. And certainly when I will speak to you a little further about translation and transcreation, as I believe it is certainly something that is going to affect how we produce bilingual content, moving forward. Okay. Deborah, please help me if at any point there's any activity that I need to look at on the chat thread. Just kindly give me a thumbs up or a hands up.
Will do.
You can look at that. Thank you, ma'am. And take the next slide, please. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the translation and transcreation. So this Intersect is a pretty interesting workspace. when you translate, we know that you're focusing on the individual meaning of these words, right? We look for ways to interpret what is the closest to that original term. We look for ways to really provide the understanding for our consumer, for our user, of what we're trying to say in one language and bring it into a language that they understand. When we transcreate, what we're doing is providing that linguist more freedom to focus on the complete message. By doing so, we are going to maintain the intent. We're going to maintain the style, the tone, and the context of what we're trying to say. We also consider several different aspects that are incredibly important, such as emotions and cultural and socioeconomic factors. I'm going to take a pause here real quick, and I will tell you, if you have any Hispanic family members, and I'll just bring my mom as an example. There are many things, many topics, many health topics specifically that moms always seem to know best. If you were raised in a Hispanic family, you know that moms always come through with those home remedies and a lot of these ideas of how to improve health, in the home. You take that and you amplify the emotional and those socioeconomic factors in each household, and you'll find that many topics, many health topics specifically, are considered taboo, or considered things that we just don't talk about within the family unit. And this has proven challenging, because many folks that do not have access to resources really just kind of go through life without having this information, without learning, without having an opportunity to really to educate themselves on some of these things that because of cultural reasons or cultural emotionally backgrounds, these things are not looked at, are not explored. So I'm a firm believer that the reason why our product is successful is because it is incredibly easy, at your fingertips, to come and look for information that you normally perhaps would not, discuss in a home, if that makes sense. So let's go to the next slide. So let's talk one more thing about translation. I just want to recap this. When we're translating content, we're really focusing on the meaning of those words. This is important when you're looking at clinical terminology and we're talking about health and disease and conditions. With transcreation, or when we're transcreating, we have that freedom to focus on the message, because what we have to do is convey that information to our consumers, but present it to them in a way where the message is readily accepted, it's trusted, and it is available to them without necessarily having to go back and try to refigure out, what this other terminology means that has just been translated into Spanish, for example. So instead of just replicating the message, we really are looking to target that audience and provide them with the information that will resonate with them. A challenge that we as health professionals deal with when working with Hispanic and Latino populations, or in Spanish as a language overall, is that sometimes a targeted message for one audience is not going to resonate well with a different group. And so we have to be very careful how we craft messaging, how we craft our translations, so that we can ensure that the content resonates with as many people as possible. I will talk a little bit about language in a couple of slides forward, but remember that the Spanish language is one language with so many different dialects. Each one of those dialects is tied to different types of cultural groups, which then provide a different way of understanding what we're saying. Yes, Deborah?
Something that goes along those lines was mentioned in chat a little while ago. Monica wanted to point out, in response to your question about link disparity, that maybe some of the links don't apply or are too much to translate.
Thank you very much. Monica, thank you for that comment. I mean, this is pretty much the way of life, right? So as we look for content and meaningful content in Espanol, and it has to meet the very high standards that MedlinePlus establishes on these resources, we're going to find, or I should say, we're not going to find as much content, as many resources in Espanol as there are in English. So the struggle is going to be to constantly have updated resources for our consumers, knowing very well that we're going in with a deficit of information of content research overall in Spanish. But thank you for that comment. Thank you, Deborah, for flagging that.
There is
And
one more
I'll close
response.
with my bullet here is, I'm sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry.
You're having some good engagement in the chat now. There's one more response to what you were saying to tie into
Awesome.
that. Karen says the disparity between total links seems like simply a delay in not yet translating everything, probably prioritizing health issues most urgent and important to people who speak Spanish and targeting messages. They have no specific insight into why this happens, but they're very interested to hear other perspectives or experiences.
Karen, thank you very much for that comment. We have colleagues that I have colleagues in different government agencies. Some of them who we work very closely with in looking for information, looking for updates. And I will tell you, I take significant pride in our product, because when our content goes up in English, it goes up in Spanish at the same time. There is no delay. There is no process of at that point translating, transcreating content. We do that work concurrently, and the products go up simultaneously. Some of my colleagues in other agencies don't have this opportunity. I think I'm blessed with this incredible team of professionals in my program that allow us to do this. And that delay is just that. The delay sometimes comes from not having the resources to create this content in Espanol. The delays may come from not being sure if what is the priority. How do we prioritize which content we're going to translate? I will tell you, if we solve that question, there are many institutes, many of colleagues across the ICs that are looking to take notes on what is the best way to do that. Because the issue with this is, if everything is a priority, then nothing is a priority, right? And at the same time, if you're going to prioritize specific topics, we have to be certain that this is what our consumers are looking for. And the additional challenge to that, Karen, thank you for this comment. It's raising a lot more conversation. The issue with producing more or creating more content, translating more content, is that we also have to be mindful of that the consumer that comes to our sites looking for information in English is not necessarily prioritizing health topics, for example, in the same way that consumers that speak Spanish. Just the same, consumers that are bilingual, where that household speaks both English and Spanish. And surprisingly, I've learned in my work with bilingual consumers is that they're also a population to themselves. So we deal with English, Spanish speakers, and that bilingual consumer population that's right in the middle. And they're fantastic because they navigate one way or the other, depending on where the information that they look for is available. And with that, my last bullet here is how the message is perceived by that target audience is everything. And I can't emphasize that enough. How we provide that message, how we craft it, how we transcreate, translate is everything for that consumer. And I'm certain that you all have examples as professionals here about situations where translations have gone wrong, or translations that just did not make their mark. We'll take the next slide, please. Okay, so just very briefly, I want to talk a little bit about the editing process. So it all begins with the process of topics being edited in English, which ultimately will lead to a new translation. This is an example of a topic that was revised by the Institute. It was a very simple edit, just adding terminology to their definition, which prompts then the English health topic page and or the topic summary to be edited. The Espanol team will review the content, translate, transcreate. We identify that culturally relevant language across the United States, and then we look carefully at the different regional language that comes from different parts of the Spanish-speaking world, but even in the United States. If you're a fluent or a bilingual speaker and you've traveled to New York City, you will learn very quickly that Spanish is different than the Spanish they use in Florida, or practice in Florida, versus the Midwest, versus the Southwest, versus the West Coast. So that regional language from different parts of the world is actually replicated here in the United States. Next slide, please. Okay, this is what the sample editing looks like. I just want to give you a quick snapshot. So our health topic page, in this case, this is a medical test, I believe we're looking at here. Okay, so matter one is a topic, and then we added some terminology. The toggle switch on the arrow on the left is pointing to the Espanol, and then on the right graphic, you'll see we're looking at where this information comes from. This is what I call our SMEs, our source of the information and the updates. In this case, it's NIDA. And then next slide, and then this will show you what the process looks like in Espanol. And as you can see, it's an exact replica of what we have in English. The only difference here is that the content, as we add these key terminologies, there may be more or there may be less words, also known as. The toggle to go back and navigate to English is there. And of course, we're crediting our IC or the source of information for this update. In many cases, there will be health topics, there will be words, conditions, diseases that have more AKAs in one language than the other. That's just the nature of our language and how we speak. If you don't believe me, look at visit the FDA sites when they recall certain products. And many times, and I'll give you one, for example, that we've always grappled with. When you're looking at something like peanut allergy, something, relatively simple. Well, it turns out there's so many different ways to say peanut in Espanol. So depending on where you come from, you might know it in a different way. So I encourage my active chat thread here to go ahead and drop the way that you translate the word peanut. I'm not going to give you any pointers here, just to see what the team comes up with. With that, we'll move to the next slide. Okay, so these other cultural challenges, important information to highlight. So when we're reaching out to Spanish-speaking consumers, there's going to be certain criteria, certain issues that you always have to keep in mind because the content that you're producing may affect, in one way or the other, different ethnic classifications. And as I mentioned earlier, because the Spanish-speaking population is so diverse, each ethnic group has a different way of understanding or of processing that information, and a certain terminology that is considered better or more favorable than others. All this is due to those cultural barriers, the sets of values and beliefs. Latinos, by definition, are populations that are very proud and very cohesive within those cultures, within those microcultures. And so with that, you're dealing with barriers as well. And overcoming those barriers is done only by using the adequate translation, proper language, and again, by being very sensitive to those different cultural nuances. And, of course, as I mentioned many times, understanding that Spanish is one language, but with many, many dialects. And again, I can give you many examples, and I welcome yours on the thread of many things that we know them in one way, and our neighboring country or a neighboring state here in the U.S. Knows them as something different, really, because we're bringing that culture with us and producing these different definitions of these different terminology for things that are very common in English in one or two ways to say. So with that, there's also the localisms and healthcare misconceptions. This is something that we will struggle with on a daily basis, and I'm incredibly grateful again to having been a part of this conference today, because it's exactly what we're doing. We're clearing up and we're cleaning those healthcare misconceptions by bringing these consumers together, helping them understand that we do understand the issues and the different dialects and those cultural barriers, and that our goal is really to provide these resources in a way that is absolutely beneficial to them. Every one of the different cultures in the United States with Spanish-speaking backgrounds has a different path of acculturation. And this refers specifically to the type of history that we have with certain populations. and not just how they handle translated content, but also how excuse me, I apologize, that's one alone, different ways of understanding information. And so if the last two bullets are underlined specifically because I want you to understand that research qualification criteria and informed consent are incredibly difficult areas to translate. And some colleagues at the clinical center, for example, have provided information about how difficult it is to explain informed consent, whether it is not just translating from English to Spanish, but then explaining it to a Spanish-speaking consumer. Next slide, please. Okay, so just some additional resources at a glance here. Our site using MedlinePlus, and again, the toggle in Spanish, information from trainers and librarians. Next slide, please. And I highly encourage you, all of you, to please visit our site and navigate through our wonderful resources. There's specifically information for trainers and librarians, again, in English and in Spanish, and a lot of resources for your day-to-day. And of course, I'm always available and happy to follow up with you if you have any questions on any of our content. Next slide, please. Okay, just so very quickly, some social media snapshots. And then what I want to highlight here is that our content is vetted. It brings you back to the resources in our page. And then if you click the next graphic on this same slide, you'll see that we replicate the exact same content in English to Espanol. If you hit the next slide, please. There we go. So you'll see the content replicating. And in this case, this is some Instagram posts that I used for examples. And with the next slide, I think I have about 2 or 3 of these examples. We'll just breeze through them, please. So Parkinson's disease, this is our content or our post in English. This is the content in Espanol. Everything that we do, we replicate in both languages. Again, it's concurrent, and it is hand in hand with the information for our consumers. And I think I have one more. Okay, some very important topics with mental health. This is the sample post, and this is its counterpart in Espanol. And sometimes the content, does better in English. Sometimes it does better in Spanish. Our goal is always to ensure that the information is readily available for our consumers. Next slide, please. And I'm only pushing through these a little bit because we do have just a few minutes left here. But our health topic, sample health topic, mental health, and we hit the next graphic, please. And you'll see the page is cut off. It's a lot of information. So I've done like 2 shots to give you an idea of all the different wonderful resources that are contained. And then we'll do the same for Spanish. We'll do click and then one more click. Here we go. And then here it comes in Spanish. So again, replicates information. I want to point out that, the difficulties in finding those resources, we go ahead and click the next 2 graphics, please. We work hard to ensure that that information is available and that we have valuable information for the consumers. If we had a little more time, I would really dive into dissecting what that health topic page looks like. But again, encouraging you all to please visit. It's a snapshot of all the different resources that we provide in our page. Next slide, please. Okay. Any questions? Anything that we can that'd be able to clarify or conversation points that you'd like me to take back with me? I'd be happy to open it up for the room.
Javier, great presentation. You had a lot. This is quite the chat. It's been it's been hot.
Excellent.
Yes, so I wanted to highlight a couple of just a quick ones because we don't have, in the interest of time, to some of the questions. But Giovanna had an interesting comment, and she pointed out when we translate to English, when we translate English to Spanish, it's important to use neutral Spanish. Here in the USA, we have Latinos/Hispanics from different countries. So that's a comment that came up. And of course, peanut, that was very popular. Cacahuates, mani, that's the way I've learned, so yeah, so there's so many different, but mani being the most that we saw in the chat. So very, very interesting that it's come up there, yeah.
And peanut was just a really easy example, but when we look at certain health topics, certain conditions that don't even have real, real true translations, and we have to explain to our consumers with the same name in English, but with resources in Espanol, always a challenging but incredibly rewarding opportunity to help educate our consumers. Again, I am incredibly grateful and honored really to be here today and to share this information with you. Please feel free to reach out anytime. A wonderful team of professionals, the Health Information Program, who are advocates for health information as we work very hard to maintain this database. And I also have a fantastic team of Spanish content developers, these translators who are awesome in helping us create this product. With that, I thank you once again, and please feel free to reach out if there's anything I can do to assist you in your programs. Have a great afternoon and have a successful rest of the day. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Javier. You did a wonderful job and you really did engage folks. And I think there'll be some wonderful conversation and work that comes out of that. And thank you so much, Frank, for your work and effort too. You are most appreciated. This was a wonderful session, and I will now turn it over to Gail Kwame to introduce our next session and speaker.
Thanks for watching. This video was produced by the network of the National Library of Medicine. Select the circular channel icon to subscribe to our channel, or select a video thumbnail to watch another video from the channel.